I want to start off by saying I'm trying to remind myself about this, is that climate change, or rather the climate being changed by fossil fuel corporations and our governments, should be all about today's children. Should be all about today's children. That should be the total focus, right? But I checked the IPCC and other publications today, and children are barely mentioned at all. In the sixth assessment, just two minor mentions of very little significance. So we really have to try and change that. So this video is this month, over the past month, 6 weeks, there have been the biggest climate change research papers published ever. They are all very big findings. So I'm going to go into that later in the video. But first of all, there is some good news. Oh my gosh, there is. And you probably may have heard about this because it did get into the media. The International Court of Justice had an advisory finding, a decision, that countries are legally obligated to curb their emissions, to protect the climate, and to do so for 1.5 degrees C, which of course is long gone. But that really was a major achievement for the most vulnerable countries who presented the case to the court. So that's very good. Another similar one, which didn't get the attention, is the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And last month, they had a very similar finding. They found that countries were required to control their greenhouse gases within a 1.5 C limit. But they went even further. They said that greenhouse gases must be regulated. They must be regulated from both public, that's the government, and private organizations, namely fossil fuel corporations. So that was a very strong finding, and that was very good indeed. What we're seeing now, I checked the NASA GRACE satellite map very recently, and what we're seeing now is what was anticipated years ago, that under global warming, the wet areas will get wetter and the dry areas will get drier. And when you look at the map of the world from GRACE, it absolutely stands out. You've got very large regions in both hemispheres of brown drought, and then the blue is a lot of water, and you've got big areas of blue as well. So the planet is sort of being divided up now because of global warming into areas of extreme wetness, and of course the United States has recently over and over experienced that, as has northern China. There's been lots of droughts going on over the past month all over the world. Canada, where I live, huge drought. Western Canada, all of Western Canada practically, and northern Canada is in deep drought. And that's a big reason, of course, for the continuing record huge wildfires burning the northern Canadian forests, the boreal forests. So that's a very bad situation. Brazil is in drought, and the Amazon is still in drought. Now, nothing like the drought of 2022, but all of these years, the Amazon has not come out of drought. And that's a crucially bad, of course, for the Amazon rainforest. Europe has gone into deepening drought, strangely enough, with the exception of Spain, which is getting its own trouble with, of course, heat waves, but very deep drought for the rest of Europe. And this is drought going on into the groundwater for Europe. Europe's in terrible trouble, both for heating, which is double the global average, and for drought accompanying that. The UK is in drought, and that's really actually very unusual. I mean, I'm from the UK, and it's regarded as sort of wet country, right? Nepal is in drought, and Nepal has been having bad forest fires this year. Northern China is in drought, despite the fact, of course, that northern China is experiencing severe floods. So this is the pattern of global warming. You get both. You get both in a very narrow period of time. You get drought, you get huge precipitation, you get flooding. And that's called compound extreme weather events, I guess. Now, talking about compound extreme weather events and heating and drought, there was a paper published last year, actually, that in the northern hemisphere there's been a 6-fold increase in concurrent large heat waves. So these are heat waves in various countries in the northern hemisphere happening at the same time. And we've seen this dramatically over the years. And thanks to NASA and thanks to Climate Reanalyzer, we can see this very easily. 6-fold increase. That's absolutely huge. The other thing that's been increasing exponentially, according to another recent research paper, is what's called climate whiplash. And that's a sort of super event to what I've just been describing. And that is when there's been severe drought, and that's rapidly followed by severe precipitation and flooding. And it's called a whiplash of the climate, increasing exponentially. There was a paper published in June of this year which did get a lot of media, which is very good. It was a very important paper. It looked into the effects of crop yields of global heating and climate change. But this paper checked what would happen if adaptation was used. And they found that adaptation, because it's really hard to adapt to rapid global heating, rapid drying, rapid drought events. The other thing that they found is that the highest impact on temperature increase affecting the crops was in the world's breadbaskets, was in the world's most important regions for growing crops. So that was a very important finding from that paper. Now, there was a huge paper published. I'm getting into the huge papers now, I guess. There was a huge paper published last month, July, and that found unprecedented continental drying and shrinking of fresh water. So huge paper, huge findings, really not anticipated, certainly not to this extent. And the paper commenting that the drying areas, the increasing drying, is happening much faster than the increasing wetting and raining. So this is on a continental basis now. There was 2 papers published last month that confirmed that climate change is increasing the world's forest fires. So there's 2 papers, they nailed it, different approach. There's no question now about that. And of course we're seeing it, like every summer we're seeing it. And the fires go on for a long time, particularly of course the Canadian fires. Also a paper last month, big papers, all in the past month or so, recorded that 2023 was a record-breaking year for marine heat waves. There's never been anything like it of marine heat waves across the world's oceans. A large proportion of the world's ocean surface were under a marine heat wave, super temperature increase. And then there was another one about ocean surface temperature and related to marine heat waves as well. But what this paper found was that in the past 25 years, there's been a 7.7-fold increase in ocean surface affected by marine heat waves. Just in the past 25 years. So there's a huge increase in marine heat waves. Now, I wasn't surprised about that because the AR6, the IPCC report, had a projection of marine heat waves along with the sea ice and everything else. And it was way above the very worst case scenario on marine heat waves. Now, This is really, really bad because marine heat waves, obviously they're bad for coral reefs and obviously bad for marine organisms, but they actually boost land heat waves as well. So they're very significant to our climate crisis, our climate emergency on land. This next big paper, and it's big indeed because this is yet another paper on tipping points. And every time we get a research paper, a new paper, our situation appears to certainly get a lot worse. And this is the case on this paper, published April of this year, 2025, because the title is High Probability of Triggering Climate Tipping Points Under Current Policies. So most of us who are interested in climate change will certainly be aware of the great number of tipping points that there are. There's one item that I take issue with, and this applies to this particular paper, and that is the Arctic sea ice tipping point. Because the IPCC and the scientific papers, including this one, does not recognize the Arctic summer sea ice as a tipping point factor. This paper, as with many others, only includes the Arctic winter sea ice. And of course, that's a huge mistake because the Arctic summer sea ice is the tipping point of very many other tipping points around the Arctic and the northern hemisphere. So I do have to point that one out. The other thing that I pointed out when I prepared this image, and the recent research by James Hansen, 2 papers, and his other authors, was that we are way past the disastrous climate limit of 1.5 degrees C. And if we're not past 2 degrees C, we're going to be past it very, very soon because nothing is being done about putting global emissions into decline. So when I say here we have to be extremely worried about 2 degrees C, that's definitely the case on these multiple tipping points. Actually, the title of the paper was High Probability of Triggering Climate Tipping Points Under Current Policies. There's been a lot of great research on tipping points. There's been a lot of attention. But this paper was really, really significant because what the paper did as well, it projected according to the equilibrium temperature increase. Now, all the other projections only go up to 2100. So when you say this is going to happen, that's going to happen, it's only to 2100. Now, whatever the temperature increase is, 2100, it's going to be more. So they applied that. And of course, it made everything different. Under the worst case scenario, practically all of the tipping points were triggered. There's been some great papers from Linton and Kemp and people, and that have been telling us, there's really reason to be very worried about tipping points. But this one really confirmed it, big time. And as I say, the title was High Probability of Tipping Points Under Present Policy. We have to, this is survival of civilization, survival of humanity, of life on Earth. Multiple planet tipping points. And of course they cascade. They make each other worse. I must mention, of course, in some detail, the Canadian fires. The fires in the northern Canada forests, they've now burned almost 26,000 square miles. 26,000 square miles. That's absolutely staggering. It's not going to be anything like as bad as 2023, but it's probably going to be as bad or even somewhat worse than last year. So every year now we're getting a huge spread intensity of fires up in the Canadian, northern Canada, and up in the Canadian boreal, which is so important, because the boreal is now a big carbon sink. We've lost the Amazon and the tropical rainforest as a carbon sink. The boreal is functioning really well as a carbon sink, but we have to look after that as we have to look after our whole planet, as we have to look after all of our children in all the world. Another very big paper. This was published last month. This one was published last month. And this is an absolutely stunning paper, an absolute stunner. I had to read it over and over again. The paper is called The History of a 3 C Future. And what it did was, it used its computer models on the trends of emissions and the trends of emissions from all sources, right? And what they determined was that without an unprecedented change, we are going to be at 3 C by 2050. 3 C by 2050. And we thought 2 C by 2050 was horrible. So that is a huge finding, right? All of these huge scientific findings should be forcing us to urgency, forcing us to action, but really it's not happening yet, is it? So the quote was, failing an unprecedented technological change or an unprecedented contraction of the global economy, by 2050, global surface temperatures will rise more than 3 C above pre-industrial. That is the biggest of big papers, right? We are in an absolute shocking situation. We should not be surprised, because every year our governments, as I say, and our corporations, every year are increasing their emissions, increasing their fossil fuel emissions. So every year, CO2 emissions is a record, another record, another record, another record, right? We also should not be surprised, because atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations is increasing as fast as ever. This 3 C by 2050, when you consider what are called the drivers of global warming and climate change, when you consider the emissions, the atmospheric concentrations, and also the radiative heat forcing, we can see that we are setting ourselves up for that. And, you know, nobody apparently is noticing, right? And there's no huge call to do what the IPCC 6th assessment said we have to do, which I repeat over and over and over whenever I can. The 6th assessment mitigation said that in order to limit global warming to 1.5 C, that's long gone, and in order to limit it to 2 C, global emissions had to be in decline by 2025, quote, at the latest. Nobody is still mentioning that, right? So, my God, we have to respond to all of these terrible, horrible, huge research findings by doing very quickly what the IPCC says we have to do. We're heading for global heating hell. And it's the corporations and our own governments that are heading us there, and heading all today's children there, not to mention all future generations. It's the children today that matter. So, this is double. 3 C is double what everybody is still talking about. The scientific community is still talking about 1.5 C. They're still talking about holding the temperature to 1.5 C. It's completely absurd. It's totally, totally impossible without extracting massive amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And that's why the scientists are saying this. Technology will allow us to keep below 1.5 C. That's a terrible, awful thing to say, because we've got all these accelerating drivers, right? Okay, you know, we're never going to be able to go back to 1.5 C, never. And the other thing is, we have no capacity whatsoever. Of course, the fossil fuel corporations, but like the scientists and the governments, they're assuming, right, that we can remove vast amounts of CO2 emissions and everything's going to be fine. That's complete ridiculous nonsense. We have no capacity today, zero. MIT says that it would take 30 years, some people say 20 years, to develop, you know, if we put investment and corporations behind it, to develop the capacity to remove CO2 emissions at scale, right? We do need, we always have needed to remove some CO2. So we do need to what I call a Manhattan Project. all resources of scientists and financing concentrating on the one thing that we absolutely have to be able to do to have a planet at all in the future, to have a future for us at all in the future. We have to be able to extract huge amounts of CO2. Humanity, our human civilization, if we get together and face a huge, overwhelming situation, which of course the Manhattan Project was the Second World War, we can make miracles happen. But there seems to be no interest whatsoever in that. Think about the children. Think about the children. Okay, so I'm finishing off, which in every respect perhaps is the worst of all news. And of course, the worst of all news is the climate catastrophe that's called Trump, right? President Trump is a climate catastrophe all on his own. He's doing what he said he was going to do. He's ramping up the production of United States fossil fuel production to the absolute max. The United States is already the leader in the production of oil and the leader in the production of natural gas. But of course Trump, one of his first 2 executive orders was to declare an energy emergency because he said we had to have even more. And that included the United States going back to coal. The United States has a lot of coal mines which are not operating, and Trump has already started the process to restart those coal mines. So that is the really worst of all news. And there's something very recent relating to that, which I've been working on recently, which is the Department of Energy, which of course is a Trump Department of Energy. So the Secretary of Energy now is the founder and CEO of a major United States fracking corporation, one of the huge ones. So what the Trump administration has done now is to really go for the jugular of the capacity of the United States to control to any extent its greenhouse gas emissions. And that is, they are going to rescind the 2009 EPA endangerment finding. That was a huge document. It was almost a total climate change assessment of its own. Many scientists, many chapters, and determined with absolute certainty that emissions of greenhouse gases were harmful to the public health and to the livelihood of Americans. So President Trump and his administration, just the opposite, right? They are going to make the future for Americans absolutely unlivable. I mean, imagine, in the United States, as I've been saying for a long time, is highly vulnerable to the extreme events of climate change. That's always been clear. The models have always indicated that as well. You know, I mean, it seems to be every few nights on the television you see another, you know, extreme weather event. Terrible, you know, people being rescued from heat waves and floods and, you know, on and on and on. And superstorms. So what the Trump Energy Department now has launched supposedly a scientific reassessment of the endangerment finding in order to get rid of it. And it is the basis of all really environmental pollution control in the United States, and greenhouse gases let alone. So they put together 5 well-known denier hacks who have PhDs. And a couple of them, they have very reasonable qualifications in climate change. But they're well-known deniers. They've been in denying films. The latest denial film that I think came out last year, it's on YouTube. Please don't go and see it. 2 of this team, so-called science team on climate change that Trump's administration has put together, they were actually in that film. So these are they only managed to get 5 scientists, right? In all the world, they only managed to get 5 scientists to put together a supposed scientific report which supposedly supports Trump administration's agenda, okay, of killing clean energy in the United States and going back to coal production, the very worst energy source. The final thing I'll say about this paper is that it is an absolutely deadly dangerous thing that these 5 skeptic, denial, so-called, well, scientists, yeah, they're scientists. One's an economist from Canada, have put together. This is the most dangerous document ever, because this document is going to be used by the Trump administration, right, to make the United States produce way more fossil fuels than it ever has. That's what the significance is. I don't know whether people really in the media have put that together, right? But formally, the Department of Energy, you can read that this paper is a proposed paper for the rescinding of the Endangerment Finding Act of the past EPA. The EPA now, as I say, like the Department of Energy, all of the departments now, they're all handled by climate change deniers stroke boosters of more and more fossil fuel energy. Now, it's painfully obvious that if we continue to increase production of fossil fuel industry, to increase fossil fuel emissions, it's gone, right? Like David Suzuki would be really right. It's really too late. So all of these papers that I've sort of gone through, they're reasons why it's too late. And as I've been trying to say, it's not too late for all of us to get together, to buckle up, and to act on this. We have to have a worldwide movement. We have to have a climate revolution, All of the world must be up in arms about this, because these insane individuals are totally determined to wreck the entire planet. So, yes, we need a revolution. David Suzuki mentioned it. Yeah, we definitely need one. We've needed one for actually for a long time. So, my last appeal will be to at least get into action, confronting, opposing the insane agenda of the United States Trump United States Trump administration. That's the least that we could do. And that's not hard to do, because everybody knows it's completely insane and crazy, and it's becoming more and more obvious that President Trump is insane and crazy. So we can definitely start that up. And of course, there are well-known other things we can all do as well to make things better, give our future a better chance. Yeah, this will be my final comment. What we have to do is give the future a chance, right? There's a lot of talk about hope, right? No, we don't need hope, okay? We need courage to give the future a chance, and that's what we absolutely have to do. It's easy to do. It's easy to get motivated. Think of your children. Think of your small children. Think of your small grandchildren. Think of your small nieces and nephews. Think of the world that they're being condemned to because of our economics and our presidents and leaders who are still subsidizing the fossil fuel industry and, of course, our fossil fuel corporations, right? Our children need us to fight for them. Okay, thanks. Final word. Fight for the children.